And hello, this is DrIzixs with a sort of how-to sort of video. I know I don't do many of these, but I figured I did the achievement, so might as well tell you guys what. Sort of inspired by the some posts on the Reddit and some speculation therein, the discussion threads there. I have recently accomplished around the world in 80 years. Now, this is a new achievement in the newest version of the game, 2.23 of Europa Universalis 4 here. And the goal of it is as a customization of up to 400 points in the British region, this one here, New York, San Francisco, Suez, Bombay, Calcutta, Hong Kong, and Yokohama by, well, specifically 8 years in the game. We are presently in 1508, so we are not quite to the 1520 something here. It's not going to tell me anymore. You know, we have accomplished it. Now, how did I do that? Well, playing as custom nation, of course. We'll get into the territory stuff here in a bit. Let's go through at the basics of setup. Now, I don't have my original starting guy anymore, my starting character, who was a 666. He had an heir that was 000. I disinherited him when I could. I had a consort of a 000 as well. They were terribly, well, not long for the world, you could say. So that's sort of where I got a lot of my early monarch points from. But what else did I do? I went with a cognate, text and government type, step nomads, so I could do all sorts of crazy stuff like, well, I got a border with you, I can now declare war on you and conquer whatever I like without having to waste a bunch of diplomacy points to do that. Why? Because we want to take exploration ideas. But I'm getting ahead of myself. From there, I picked a Shinto religion. Why? Because morale of armies plus 10%. In the beginning of the game, morale is king. So that was a very nice thing to do. Now, the local missionary strength is irrelevant. We weren't planning to do much conversions. In fact, we got one province here in the jolly old England here that is still Catholic. That's fine. What else did we do? We also selected some specific ideas. They were, we started off with morale of armies plus 20%. Once again, early game, morale is king. Colonial range plus 40%. That way we could go colonizing things like the Caribbean very early, basically. As soon as we got to exploration ideas to explore, we can say, yeah, we can go have a look at that there. From there, we had discipline plus 10%, followed by global settler increase to speed up our colonies, and finally core creation cost. Everything else after that was kind of pointless, so just set that up to balance out the various point costs to make sure everything worked. Now, let's go. I don't think there's anything else I need to go over as far as basic setup goes here. Yes, we got some tributaries, but let's look at the timeline. Yes. So at the beginning of the game, this is what our map looked like. England still existed, had Oxfordshire and Calais, which we later conquered. We also grabbed Haha down here, so we get better colonial range over to the Americas here as soon as we could. We also got this little bit from Tunisia. Now, we couldn't really stretch any further from here, but figured this was a good starting place for moving east. And we're going to take it slow here. Our initial war was against England, so we can get, let's go pause here, because as a step nomad, we don't start with feudalism, so we want to get that going as fast as possible so that we could actually maybe, take up at a reasonable rate. So we took over a couple of bits of England, and that was basically the only war in, Europe that we actually got into. From there, we attacked, Fazan to take Jaffa and Sirte. We didn't in the long run end up keeping those, but they were necessary in order to get a border with the Mamluks, which we, not too long after, got in a fight with, beat them down a bit, and acquired some new lands, basically getting the first of our required provinces, the Suez. Now, from there, we had Tabuk, which we took off the Mamluks, and we then started moving a little bit further east. Ta-da. Now, I did start running into a little problem that I was moving so quickly east, I didn't have quite finish coring enough stuff over here to actually core things up, so I enjoyed a fair bit of unrest for a while, but that was not too much problem. So I started to sell off some of the land over here, especially after I finished coring Hafar, and from there was able to core up all this stuff and continue moving east. Now with sea border stuff, moving further east from there was not going to be too much of a problem, but I kept up the land connection, slowly digging my way through India, taking a bit out of Malwa. Yes. Took down a bit of Orissa by this point here. Now, we're only at 1475. I got this far. So it was about this point, I believe I backed up a bit, started to rebuild my manpower so I could beat Don Mamonis, who had gotten quite large. They were also allied with Bengal at the time. Then there's another truce because we had to deal with the truce with Bengal. And then around this point, I started really building up the tributaries so I can get a lot of manpower to make up for, well, the upcoming struggle. Got out myself a border with the Nepal here so that I could basically get my way to the border of China without having to necessarily fight Ming before I was ready. Because these guys here, Cam, they were a tributary of China. But these guys, Guj, they were not. And they were allied to each other. So I wanted a nice little land border with these guys so I could attack them whenever I liked. And so we beat up on Nepal after a few years. Now at this point, I was maybe taking it a little easier because I didn't necessarily have to rush quite so much because I had plenty of time, you know. It was like another 30 years, something like that. So attacked Guj, didn't actually conquer them. We took a chunk out of Cam, got us a border with Ming that started hurting their mandate a bit. Now they just passed imperial reform, or whatever the China version of those are. So their mandate was actually quite low, and me bordering them was starting to cause them little issues because, well, I had over 300 development, was a horde on their border. So they're like, yeah, this isn't going to work. So they didn't much care for me, but I had a pretty strong army at this point, plus that crazy morale bonus stuff going on, plus 30. Early game, crazy, I know, right? And then kept up on military tech as much as I can. I managed also, at this point, get a extra colonist, so I could start colonizing my way around this way, based out of Bengal. Also, by this point, I'd already colonized here in the Caribbean, and then across Central America here. Now there's a couple options for doing this, but figured this would be the best option here. To basically get as close to our eventual destination in California as quick as possible. I also went ahead and grabbed Manhattan when the tribes here moved out of the way. Anywho, I didn't necessarily feel like conquering my way through Mexico, so decided to just go this route instead. Plus, my armies are all busy over here. I didn't want to ship them across the world. I have a Ming to fight. And so I did. It was actually a pretty quick war. They're like, we're going to avoid your army, so they decided to move all their guys down here, basically bypassing my army and letting me to occupy a large section of mainland China here. And from there, I was able to use my colony over here to get a claim on Ryukyu, which I also forced Ming to give up their overlordship of. And from there, I can get a claim on Satsuma, which give me an opportunity to invade Japan proper. And there we are. And we hadn't quite started colonizing here, but we would shortly. There we go. And that's where we ended it. Around the world in less than 80 years. Crazy, I know, right? The important things are to remember is that your army is kind of the king on this one. You don't need to necessarily keep all the territory you conquer. And make sure to use your horde ability to raise provinces, both to get monarch points and to make coring them cheaper, as well as the ability to make tributaries. Because even though I beat up on some of these guys here, I made sure to take the least expensive provinces possible to avoid coalitions, which allowed me to eventually make them tributaries in the long run anywho. Also, given that I started up in England, that means I could tributize basically Scotland, Ireland, Brittany, some of the Low Countries, Provence, in fact. Yeah, and I even managed to Urbino and Lucca. That's pretty crazy. Yeah, and yeah, I got Genoa too. Cool. Forgot about that. Yeah, so that's how I did it. And I avoided, I guess some of the goals I had to do, had in mind was, didn't want to do any coalitions, so I did have to sort of watch my aggressive expansion. My diplomats spent most of their time improving relations, and the rest of the time looking for tributaries, doing war and peace deals, and that was basically it. I did a couple claims, mainly just to make things cheaper early on, but that's about it as far as that stuff goes. Didn't really do any conversions. Kind of pointless for a lot of this territory anyway. The couple of incidents went ahead and happened because, you know, it took me about 60 years to get in. Anything else I want to mention before? I took a lot of loans. If you don't like loans, then this is maybe not the way to do it for you. Did debase currency a few times. You know, I got 10 corruption here. But remember, this is there is no necessity to have a functional country at the end, just one that meets these requirements. So don't necessarily feel hemmed in by, oh, my economy sucks. Well, who cares? Anyway. And so this has been DrIzixs doing around the world in 80 years. Holy crap, or less, yes. So, hope you enjoyed, and hope this is informative for you. Remember, those ideas, again, they're the real key here. Get your armies powerful, and get your colonization game moving quickly. Yes, yes. And if you enjoyed, want to see more stuff like this, let me know. But otherwise, until next, everybody, turtles. Woohoo!